Right now, Russia is on the brink of total collapse. The Kremlin is in a panic. Lavrov is disrupting negotiations while the West is applying maximum pressure. The G7 has prepared a final blow. The US is just one step away from a decision that could bring down Putin's entire power structure. The Ukrainian armed forces have new, incredible fighter jets. They're even better than the F-16s, and this changes the rules of the entire war. Hellish explosions in Russia. Kinzhal missiles are now without spare parts, and in the Kursk region, the occupiers' equipment has been blown up completely. All this and more in our program Hotspot. The Kremlin is furious. Lavrov threw a tantrum and disrupted negotiations with Ukraine in the Vatican. In response, the G7 is applying maximum pressure. This decision shocked everyone, and the US is already on the verge of making a decision. Marco Rubio is ready to betray Trump and strike a blow against Putin. Ultra-tough sanctions are already on the table. We'll tell you all the details right now. And right after that, we'll show you the incredible weapon of the Ukrainian armed forces that is tearing the front apart.
The people of Ukraine must choose new leadership to sign a memorandum with Russia. This is what the occupying side is claiming.
However, it now turns out that Russia is not even ready to sign the memorandum, but is instead putting forward demands that are impossible to fulfill in advance, and most importantly, requirements that cannot be met quickly. In this way, Russia is coming up with a justification for why they supposedly cannot actually cease fire right now.
At the same time, the foreign press is making headlines. The US is no longer insisting on a ceasefire in Ukraine, despite the fact that American President Donald Trump had personally promised to end the war in Ukraine. But what Trump is really succeeding at is, in his usual manner, mocking our country's attempts to expand its circle of partners.
I called Zelensky. They said he's in South Africa. I said, what the hell is he doing in South Africa?
These talks were initiated by the United States themselves. So the idea that the United States would withdraw from negotiations that they themselves conceived and initiated in order to fulfill their corresponding campaign promises with President Trump is, well, probably strange.
The American side stated that after negotiations with the Russian dictator, significant progress was made regarding the war, adding that the United States did not provide Ukraine with any security guarantees in the deal involving mineral resources. In a conversation with European leaders, Trump admitted that Putin does not want to end the war because he believes he is winning.
Regarding achievements, in reality, Trump has no achievements at all. He promised to end the war in 24 hours, in 100 days, promised this, promised that. In fact, there is no progress whatsoever in stopping the war.
A new round of negotiations on Ukraine is planned to be held in mid-June in the Vatican. Trump told the Europeans that he would send Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Special Envoy Keith Kellogg there.
I think these negotiations will lead to nothing because at that time Putin will continue to hope for a military victory, so he will simply be stalling for time. The only goal that Putin is pursuing as a result of these so-called negotiations is firstly to ensure that there is no military aid for Ukraine, and secondly, that no new sanctions are imposed.
If the ceasefire memorandum does not demonstrate that Putin is committed to peace, 500% tariffs will be imposed against Russia. Senators Richard Blumenthal and Lindsey Graham stated that Putin has only a few days before U.S. sanctions are imposed. The statement notes that Putin is still playing games, but the sanctions bill will be brought to a vote in the Senate, where it has the support of 81 out of 100 senators.
There is a high probability that it will be introduced. Moreover, as I understand it, judging by the information circulating in the American media, this bill could be voted on in the Senate as early as the end of May. But for this bill to become law, it also has to be supported by the lower house, where the speaker is Mike Johnson, a person who is absolutely 100% loyal to Trump. He will not bring any bill to a vote that has not been agreed upon with Trump. And Trump will most likely veto this bill because, as he says, again, to Ukraine's European partners, he is against sanctions since they could negatively affect American business.
It will clearly be difficult for the United States to protect Ukraine since they can't even protect themselves from Russia. The Russians managed to hack 10,000 NATO cameras, which they used to monitor the alliance's activities, particularly the delivery of weapons to Ukraine.
A real explosion of light is in the works. Aircraft even more advanced than the F-16 are entering the fight. The true legend, the Mirage 2005, is changing the rules of the game. This French bird strikes targets with lightning speed and becomes a shadow even faster. The new Ukrainian party is on its way. What missions will it carry out under the command of the Ukrainian armed forces? We'll cover this in the next segment.
They had been talked about for over a year, and finally, it has happened. French Mirage 2005F fighter jets are now in Ukraine. This was officially announced by Defense Minister Sébastien Lecornu.
On June 6, 2024, Emmanuel Macron announced the delivery of French Mirage 2000s to Ukraine. The first of them are arriving in Ukraine today. Now, with Ukrainian pilots on board, who have spent several months training in France, they will take part in defending Ukraine's skies.
Naturally, the number of aircraft delivered, their deployment locations, and the missions the fighters will carry out are all being kept secret. However, what is known are the capabilities of the French Mirages. And in some respects, they even surpass the much-praised F-16s. Originally, the aircraft was developed as a fighter capable of intercepting any aerial targets in any weather conditions. However, later on, as many as 10 different variants of these aircraft were developed for various types of missions.
Because it's impossible to create a perfect aircraft for every task. Usually, if it's an attack aircraft, it operates against ground targets. The Mirage was also originally conceived as a fighter aircraft, but over time the requirements of modern warfare, armed conflicts, and even deterrence changed. That is, the need to be able to deliver a preemptive nuclear strike.
Experts note that while the Mirages are certainly not the most advanced solution in today's aviation, they are perfectly suited to the needs of the Ukrainian armed forces. Moreover, according to rumors, the batch of fighter jets for Ukraine was prepared specifically for our conditions.
It is a highly versatile and adaptable aircraft, specifically designed with a distinctive canard wing configuration, and at the time, it was fully capable of carrying some of the most advanced weaponry available. These could include guided missiles or various types of unguided aerial bombs of different calibers, all produced by the United States and Europe.
Given these characteristics, analysts believe that the Mirages in Ukraine could be assigned several tasks at once. First of all, they serve as additional platforms for French and British long-range missiles.
It has 9 hardpoints, as I mentioned, but it should be noted that it can't even be compared to Russian aircraft. It carries the most advanced weaponry, including those very Scalp or Storm Shadow missiles.
At the same time, analysts believe that the Mirages will be able to supplement our squadrons of attack aircraft or replace them in the event of breakdowns or destruction.
If, for example, our aircraft are put out of action or we lose them, or if the Russians manage to destroy our Su-24s at the airfields, then their functions can be performed by the Mirage 2000D. This aircraft is the very latest serial modification of this model. That's right, and it is capable of carrying 2 such missiles.
Secondly, the Mirages can become an excellent reinforcement for our air defense. Upgraded radars and electronic warfare systems, as well as the ability to stay airborne for hours, make these French birds very effective in fighting against Russian Shaheds and missiles.
6,900 kilograms of payload. This can be bombs, missiles, a huge variety. Moreover, they can be equipped with external fuel tanks. Therefore, the payload weight can be reduced if greater range is needed or if the aircraft simply needs to stay in the air for a long time. For example, for intercepting something or for patrolling.
We also shouldn't underestimate the capabilities of these French veterans on the front line. Given the reinforced wing structure and its shape, the Mirages remain extremely fast and maneuverable, even faster than the F-16. The aircraft can fly at a speed of 2.2 Mach or over 2,000 kilometers per hour and can also reach an altitude of about 17 kilometers. The Mirage can carry 8 air-to-air missiles, 5 air-to-ground missiles, including even a tactical nuclear ASMP, and 9 aerial bombs. At the same time, it should not be forgotten that last year Sweden announced it would provide us with several Saab ASC-890 aircraft. These are airborne command posts similar to the Russian A-50s with a dish on top of the fuselage. So the Swedish aircraft are capable of scanning air and ground space of more than 500,000 square kilometers at altitudes up to 18 kilometers. And the French Mirages can see all this information on their instruments.
It can operate in communication with AWACS systems, and thanks to this, it can see much more, which effectively compensates for the shortcomings of its own radar. And the ability to create 3-dimensional objects on the display makes ground attacks and low-altitude maneuvers easier. However, it should be noted that the Mirages are specifically designed to operate as a team. They exchange information with each other, with ground-based radars and with AWACS systems.
Analysts have already noted that the Mirages, on par with the F-16s, will be able to perform air defense functions for Ukraine, shooting down drones and missiles, carrying out airstrikes with bombs on frontline territories, and launching long-range missiles at Russian rear positions. The only area where the French fighters fall short compared to the American ones is in direct aerial combat with the enemy. Quite simply because American missiles have a range that is a couple of dozen kilometers longer. However, along with the Mirages, our air fleet has also been reinforced with additional F-16s from the Netherlands. This was also reported yesterday by our Ministry of Defense.
Urgent! Putin's summer offensive has been exposed. Two main objectives have been revealed. The Kremlin is betting on a breakthrough at any cost, but everything has gone off plan. Powerful strikes on Lipetsk and the Kursk region have destroyed high-value targets. The factory that was churning out parts for Kinzhal and Iskander missiles has been blown up. And when the occupiers' equipment was hit, nothing was left behind. Then Trump could destroy Putin's plans with a single decision. What important decision is the US ready to make? Details in the report.
This is the American medium-range surface-to-air missile system Hawk, a weapon effective against Russian cruise missiles, according to Ukrainian defenders. This launcher has already destroyed 3 missiles. Their marks have been painted on the air defense system's body.
It has proven itself.
This system has proven itself very well. We have carried out 4 launches and shot down 4 cruise missiles. The emotions from destroying Russian cruise missiles are extremely positive. The system has shown itself to be reliable and easy to use. Since the beginning of the day, there have already been 69 battles on the front line. According to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, most of the Russian assaults are taking place in the Pokrovsk direction. In this sector, Ukrainian defenders destroyed another Grad multiple rocket launcher.
The enemy brought the Grad to a position to launch rocket strikes against our units. The defense forces delivered a precise strike on the Russian MLRS. As a result of several FPV drones hitting the target, the Russian equipment detonated and was completely destroyed. Due to the powerful detonation of the enemy launcher's ammunition, it burned brightly. This is according to a report from the Operational Strategic Group of Troops Khortytsia on Telegram.
In the Lyman sector, Ukrainian forces successfully repelled Russian assaults near Rekivka in Luhansk region, as well as near Ridkodub and Torske in Donetsk region. The enemy also attempted to advance in the areas of Novy Mir, Petropavlivka, Nova Kruhlakivka and Vovchansk in Kharkiv region. In the Vovchansk direction, fighters from the Guard Brigade destroyed electronic warfare equipment, a Korsar anti-tank missile system, and Russian infantry, while soldiers from the 4-post brigade eliminated another Solntsepiok flamethrower system using an FPV drone. It is known that the cost of such a system is $15 million. The operation of the Ukrainian Defense Forces is also continuing in the Kursk region. There, Ukrainian fighters repelled 9 assaults by the Russian army.
Regarding the Kursk operation today, the task of creating a buffer zone for our border territories remains the most important, the top priority. Actually, the Belgorod operation, well, let me put it this way. I prefer to call it the Belgorod chapter of the Kursk operation. It is also currently working to ensure that this buffer zone exists and is established on Russian border territory. Today, the Russians are forced to keep their grouping there. Moreover, these are elite airborne forces units. These are marine units which are constrained in their actions, suffering losses, and unable to push the defense forces out of Russian Federation territory. Furthermore, that's absolutely right. There have been some tactical improvements in our positions.
A masterful job. A Ukrainian pilot with the call sign Yellow Tail destroyed a Russian Shahed drone at the controls of a MiG-29 fighter during a night combat sortie.
The Ukrainian armed forces are putting up a worthy resistance against the Russian invaders. In the Kharkiv direction, a nighttime battle took place during which Ukrainian defenders destroyed trucks and camouflaged enemy equipment. Specifically, a tank, an armored fighting vehicle, 3 trucks, and a loaf van belonging to the enemy were hit. Meanwhile, guests have once again arrived in Russia. Over the course of 2 days, the aggressor country was attacked by 400 drones. Residents complained about explosions and the lack of internet.
A drone just flew over us.
In Moscow, airports were even closed, and the carpet plan was announced during the hunt for drones.
Russian social media channels are noting the ineffectiveness of Russia's air defense system. We are talking about strikes on legitimate military targets within the territory of the occupying country, which Russian air defenses were unable to prevent. In addition, there are continuing and ongoing reports of strikes on defense industry enterprises of the occupying country in the Tula and Voronezh regions.
And instead of strengthening air defenses, the Russian dictator is likely making plans to capture the city of Sumy. This conclusion was drawn by analysts from the Institute for the Study of War following Putin's visit to the Kursk region.
This is a so-called controlled information leak. In other words, the heads of the Federation's regions are offering the Russian dictator possible future scenarios, namely the capture of a Ukrainian regional center or the creation of a so-called sanitary zone in the territory of Sumy region. At the moment, there are currently no districts or territories in the Sumy region that are at this time under the occupation and control of Russian occupiers.
And now the Russians have started spreading information that their army has reached the border of Dnipropetrovsk region. But this turned out to be fake.
The appearance of this information can be classified as active operations in the information space aimed at shaping public opinion. In other words, information is being thrown out about a breakthrough directly at the administrative border of Dnipropetrovsk region, once again with the aim of exerting informational, military, and political pressure on the leadership of Ukraine.
And most importantly, the Russian army once again proves its inhumanity. The occupiers are receiving direct orders to kill Ukrainian prisoners. This is evidenced by intercepted audio recordings and videos. CNN has published yet another piece of evidence of Russia's crimes. In this video, there are 6 soldiers lying face down. At least 2 of them are shot at point-blank range, and another is led away.
Since 2022, 75 criminal cases have been opened on suspicion of the execution of 268 Ukrainian prisoners of war. It should be noted that the number of extrajudicial executions is constantly increasing. If in 2022 the Russian occupiers shot 57 unarmed Ukrainian prisoners of war, then accordingly in just the first quarter of 2025, the number of extrajudicial executions is 51 Ukrainian servicemen.
Meanwhile, Russian kamikaze drones can now attack targets at distances of up to 100 kilometers, using autonomous control without satellite navigation. These UAVs are capable of independently detecting, identifying, and attacking targets, which makes them less vulnerable to electronic warfare measures.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now. A crucial victory for Ukraine. For the first time since the war began, the Ukrainian armed forces have a powerful tank advantage on the front line. Russian equipment is being blown to pieces. Footage of burning occupiers and destroyed equipment shocks everyone. Will Putin really allow his army to be completely destroyed? And the tactics of the Russian troops for 2025 have already been revealed, and they are shocking. Don't miss it. The hottest details are already in our video.
In February 2022, when Russia attacked Ukraine, the aggressor had almost 3,500 tanks. But over nearly 3 years of war, our anti-tank weapons and drones have at least leveled the tank forces of the Russian Federation and the Ukrainian armed forces. Recently, one of the occupiers' military bloggers complained on social media that Russian tanks can only operate from covered positions, and if they move out into the open, they are immediately destroyed by Ukrainian drones.
Russian tanks, which are forced to fire from concealed positions many kilometers away from the front line, essentially function as inaccurate howitzers rather than the combat vehicles for offensive operations that their designers intended them to be. In contrast, Ukrainian tanks operate with much more freedom. It all comes down to drones, as is often the case in a war increasingly dominated by robotic systems of all kinds. The enemy has achieved sufficient scale and variety in their drones and has refined their tactics for using them.
The American magazine Forbes writes that for the first time in 35 months of Russia's large-scale war against Ukraine, the Ukrainians may have a tank advantage over the Russians, but only in certain sections along the entire front line.
Everywhere along the front line, where the Ukrainians have managed to deploy 2 drone company groups, each with several dozen operators, Russian tanks simply can't reach the attack line. They are taken out by drones many miles from the line of contact.
Ukrainian drones have made large-scale attacks by Russian armored vehicles virtually suicidal. Every time the Russian army tries to launch an attack using tanks, the result is zero.
According to the Russian side, Ukraine currently has total superiority in FPV drones. It is precisely this advantage that allows Ukraine's defense forces to effectively neutralize the enemy's significant numerical advantage in heavy armor.
Despite having fewer resources and capabilities, the Ukrainian armed forces use electronic warfare and drones more effectively than the Russian forces.
Due to intense Ukrainian radio jamming and poor quality control in drone manufacturing carried out by corrupt Kremlin bureaucrats. As a result, Ukrainian tanks can drive right up to the line of contact to directly attack Russian troops with their cannons and machine guns.
In nearly 3 years of war, Russia has lost more than 3,500 tanks. This number is equivalent to almost 15 years' worth of tank production in Russia at pre-war rates. Now, Russia has changed its attack tactics. Tanks and infantry fighting vehicles are left in the rear. Infantry, supported by artillery and drones, is slowly but steadily advancing, gradually seizing Ukrainian territory.
The Russian army has changed its tactics and strategy for using heavy equipment. In other words, the tactics of Russian forces in 2024-2025 differ from those of 2022. Why are motor vehicles being used instead of heavy armored vehicles during assaults on the positions of Ukraine's defense forces?
Russia has the capacity to produce up to 200 units of new heavy equipment per year. But taking into account the losses at the front, this number is offset. So now the Russian Federation is focusing on restoring old equipment, T-54, T-55, T-62, T-70. And unfortunately, Russia has enough of these reserves to last for more than 1 year. Ukraine does not have such reserves, so the main emphasis should be on drone production.
An incredible story straight from the hell of the front lines. A robot accomplished the incredible on the Kharkiv front. A rescue operation to save a soldier right from under the enemy's nose. They did a quality job. Ukrainian fighters showed we don't leave our own behind. How did they manage to remain unnoticed and overcome all obstacles? We'll tell you right now.
An incredible operation, the result of which is a truly saved life.
Well done, well done. His leg is wounded. All right, go ahead, as it should be. Yes, yes, yes. They're leading him. That means everything is all right. They're leading him, not carrying him, leading. So he's not badly hurt.
In these shots, you see the Ukrainian ground logistics robot Tarakan, which has been modified as an evacuation vehicle. It has an extremely important mission to save lives. In this case, it was necessary to extract a wounded Ukrainian soldier.
Come on, girl, lower it. Load him up. Yes, here. He'll pull himself up now.
Reaching the injured was only half the job. After that, there was a long road back. But the robot and its operator did an excellent job.
There, that tree, the stump. You'll reach it, then turn right. Do you see the tree? That tree, you'll get to it. Okay, go back. Forward, back, forward. Come on. Come on. It's fine, everything's fine. There you go. And to the right. When you turn more to the right. Let's see this spectacle. Just go straight. Don't be afraid. That's it. A little to the left. Yes. Everything's fine. Go. Let's go.
The total distance of this rescue operation was 12 kilometers, and the incident itself happened north of Kharkiv.
Undoubtedly a long distance, a major operation. Plus, it's important to fully understand that during transportation, there could very well have been attempts by the enemy to attack this transport module from the side. So here, let's say, respect and honor to our armed forces for carrying out such a truly high-quality operation.
Operations like these remind us that the Russian-Ukrainian war is already a war of the future, at least on the Ukrainian side.
In fact, this is not the first operation. There have already been cases of evacuation. Perhaps they weren't, made public to the media, but again, this is a good tool and it will continue to help our servicemen in the future.
At the same time, of course, we would like there to be no such cases at all. For that, we need more robotic platforms, a lot more.
You have to understand, it's one thing when personnel in full gear, wearing body armor and carrying weapons, go to their positions and carry ammunition and other necessary items themselves. It's quite another when logistics are handled by ground-based robotic systems. But again, I really have to keep emphasizing this important point. We absolutely need to move away from using personnel and instead make use of advanced robotic equipment, because these automated systems allow us to install turrets with various types of weaponry and effectively control the line of engagement, all without involving personnel directly.
Ukrainian developers are ready to meet these needs. All the necessary capabilities are in place. In fact, they can even offer a huge selection of robotic platforms to suit any preference.
In Ukraine, there are a large number of companies ready to offer various solutions, both on tracked and conventional chassis, with electric and other types of engines, in both small and large sizes. These can function as kamikaze drones that drive up to a tank and detonate beneath it. So here, the issue is really more about the need for strategic and critical thinking, which would actually allow us to ensure that every unit has enough of these tools and understands how to use them and how to deploy them on the front lines.
And we all sincerely hope that it's only a matter of time before robotic platforms truly become commonplace in the army. And perhaps this will happen very soon.
This is the best thing I see.
Putin's economy is falling apart at the seams. The military bubble that the Kremlin had been inflating for years has burst with a deafening bang. For the first time since the invasion began, Russia's GDP is declining. Even record injections into the army are no longer enough to save it. The war machine has stalled and the entire economy is on the verge of collapse. What does this mean for Russia? How soon will everything fall apart? Details that will shock you are in the report.
For the first time since 2022, the Russian economy is showing a decline. The military sector can't cope and can no longer support the civilian sector.
In March, civilian industries showed a drop of about 1.5%. If all the processes that are dragging the economy down are still at work, it means they will keep working and stagnation will very quickly turn into a recession.
Analysts from Raiffeisen Bank, based on official data from the Ministry of Economic Development, state that Russia's GDP went negative in the first quarter of this year. Experts say that the civilian economy has been in the red for a long time. It was simply hidden in the statistics thanks to military production.
The civilian economy is suffering because, to put it simply, it hasn't been developed at all over the past 3 years.
The civilian sector has been collapsing since around last summer, but now, in fact, the military sector has also started to slow down.
Essentially, the cycle of injecting money into the military economy and its growth has come to an end. That's why only now the problems that have been hidden for years are slowly starting to surface.
Of course, it's over. Where else could it have gone? I was talking about this 2 years ago, that this whole military game inevitably has an end, because it's extremely expensive, extremely complicated, and it destroys the very foundation of the economy. And it did start to collapse, which is why even the military industry itself has begun to slow down.
The growth rate of military production has dropped significantly, and it no longer pulls the rest of the industry along with it as it used to. So analysts have calculated that, excluding seasonality, GDP in the first quarter of 2025 declined for the first time since the spring of 2022.
But none of this means the war will stop. On the contrary, Putin will try even harder to take the last pennies from the population.
We will still end up paying for this. We'll just pay even more. Business will pay, because they'll squeeze even more out of it. Inflation will shoot up right past 30%.
The budget is injecting trillions of rubles into the economy. Even this no longer helps companies stay afloat.
They spent 16 trillion in just 4 months. Well, this has never happened before. Never, right? I mean, this is a colossal increase. Even compared to last year, it's more than 20% higher.
Businesses are getting poorer, losses are growing, and they have to shut down. Only the largest companies are managing to stay afloat.
Of course, it won't just be stores and businesses that will be shutting down en masse. They're already closing. It's not on a massive scale yet, but the warning signs are clear. Overall, the decline in profits, which I wrote about yesterday on my Telegram channel, is increasing catastrophically. Profits are falling across all sectors of the economy, not just in retail, not just among clothing manufacturers or those producing non-food retail goods.
Why is this happening? Experts point to several possible reasons.
There are two hypotheses. One is that things are slowing down because basically the government has decided to scale back military production, anticipating the end of the war. But I don't really believe that one. The second reason seems more likely. It's more about worn-out equipment, accidents happening, and suppliers failing to deliver.
But we shouldn't forget that advance payments for government contracts have ended as well.
Why is there a slowdown happening? Advance payments have ended. As for components, everything that could be delivered has basically already been delivered.
It's possible that suppliers are starting to play some games because a phenomenon has appeared in Russia that people had pretty much forgotten about over the past probably quarter of a century. It's called non-payments. In other words, you ship your products to a military factory, but you don't get paid. They don't pay you for a month, for 2 months, and then you stop paying your employees their salaries. And then you start to wonder, should you even take another order to supply components for tanks or not?
The shutdown of companies leads to another consequence. The budget receives much less in taxes than expected. If there are no companies and no profits, then where do you get the money for the war?
When we discussed this last year, we were calculating how much the increased profit tax, raised to 25%, could bring in, and how much this new personal income tax, raised to 22% with 5 brackets now depending on income, could give Putin. There were some scary numbers being mentioned like, oh, Putin will get 2 trillion, 3 trillion extra in the budget because of these taxes. I always said, guys, nothing like that is going to happen. There won't be any trillions because company profits will fall, and we're seeing that now.
For VAT, revenue growth is just 1% over 4 months. Last year it was 20% over the same period. This year they budgeted for a 17% increase in VAT revenue. It's basically non-existent.
All these problems will be dealt with by cutting all kinds of budgets except the military one. Everyone will soon feel additional levies on the population in the form of fines. This is the new Russian reality, and it will continue as long as Putin remains in power.
That's all for now. And for more hot news from the front, tune in to the next episode.